Okay.
Ah, no, it worked.
Okay, I think
Sorry
we're
about
good.
that.
No worries. So I just wanted to make a few general comments on this count that we've just done. So I think it's notable that the cold, snowy conditions did result in both birds and participants sheltering. The bush beater numbers were a bit reduced, and they used more of their time birding while driving than is typical. Usually everybody's out there walking for quite a while on count day. So we're very fortunate to have Geoff Holroyd as our count historian, and Geoff has prepared tonight's slideshow, and he'll also provide some information on participation in a few moments. But first, like a couple of things about the birds, right? So what about the birds? So there was a good amount of open water in the northeast section of the circle, which supported some overwintering waterfowl. However, the winter finches, the flocks did not move into the area for us this time. So those species were found only in very small numbers. So those are the redpolls, crossbills, grosbeaks, pine siskins. So kudos to you if you found some of those birds. The bird species slides that you're going to see will have the number that we reported for each on this count. And I think it's also going to show the historical zone record for each species. Have I got that right, Geoff?
Almost. On the slide, it shows last year's number. So the sequence is I show last year's numbers, and then you tell us what this year's numbers are. Okay,
I'm glad I'm prepared then, because I have those. So, so with the zone records, I'll just try to keep an eye on that too as we go along in case we have any new zone records. What else? Oh, so Geoff has made some changes to the ABC list of bird species. And that list indicates which birds we expect. And the ones that are more difficult to find, and those that are rare in Edmonton during the count season. So the new list will be reflected in tonight's presentation. Is that right, Geoff?
Yep.
Okay, okay, I had that right. So yeah, that's it for me, and over to you, Geoff.
Okay. Thanks, Anne. So hopefully everyone can see that slide now. So I often have this up when I'm giving a talk rather than people looking at the title slide all the time. So I'll give you 10 seconds to read down the list. So as much fun as it is to go out birding and exercising with our friends, even if it's driving, whenever we do that, we're having a carbon footprint. And we also, our lives have lots of other conservation actions that we can change and improve. So there's a quick list. I'm not going to read it. I assume you've all read it now for me. So this is our 74th count for 2022. Our count started in 1906, and we've been doing it continuously since 1955. So there was lots of gaps there. As you probably know, the Christmas bird count started in 1900. Which is always really annoying. I wish the counters had started in 1901, and then in 2021, this would have been the 121st count. So we're always 1 year ahead because they started in 1900. But anyway, thanks to Jill Romanchuk for all the photos that are in this presentation. Thanks to Anne for being the count compiler. She does all the hard work, as the zone captains know. As much as we all go out and count birds. The drudgery comes in compiling the results through the zone captains and then through Anne as a count compiler, who will ultimately send them to Audubon for registration in the national international compound, but compilation. So thanks to Anne, to the zone captains, and to all your participants. So one of the reasons that Edmonton's count is legendary is because in 1987, for Wildlife 87, and there's a bit of a story, and I published an article about this 10 or 20 years ago in the previous Edmonton Naturalist, before the Parkland Naturalist started, on how this happened. But we had 1,288 participants, and nobody's ever beaten that. So we hold the world's record for participants. And I guess I cheated here, Anne, rather than you telling us how many were on the count. Oh, no, that's right. So in 2021, a year ago, we had the highest count in the world. So we're down to 497, which is still pretty impressive. The closest count behind us is in the 300s. So we're more than 150 ahead of the number 2 in this unofficial race to maintain a world record. But so, Anne, how many did we get this year?
Yeah, well, I think now maybe I'm not so prepared because I don't think I have that.
Oh, okay. Well, I have the sheet that you sent me.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, 446.
Oh, thank you. I knew it was slightly less.
Yeah, so slightly less than last year, and we'll blame that on the bad weather, not on any lack of interest on folks, but it was definitely a cold day to be out there. So hopefully that will continue to be the world record for the year, as we nobody's ever near our world record. So I think that's pretty secure for a while. But that's one of the reasons that we're legendary. Oh, there's the 446.
Oh, thank you.
So there's what a graph of the number of participants. So I'm going to insert in the results here a few graphs to show you the effect of how many birds we've seen over time, and then the effect of participants. But obviously from 1985 to 1987, we had a huge growth in our participation rate, and it dropped off after that, but it's maintained itself around the 450 to 500 level through the 2000s. So hopefully we can stay at that level. Another reason we're legendary is we hold world records. We have seen more boreal owls than any other count in North America, more black-billed magpies, yay, and I mean that a yay, didn't sound enthusiastic, and more Bohemian waxwings. So we hold 3 world records over time, and then we also have 3 Canadian records. We have seen more downy woodpeckers than any other Canadian count, more blue jays, and more black-capped chickadees. And by more, I mean a 1-year count. It's not cumulative over time. So our 1-year record in some of the past years, which you'll see, have beaten all the other counts. There's our count circle. I don't know if you want to say anything extra about the count circle.
Sorry, Geoff, you're cutting out.
Oh dear. Am I cutting out for everyone?
You're good now. You were just a little
Karen?
garbled there for that moment. You're good now.
Oh, okay. Phew. Okay.
So
Maybe I'll
So I will say about the count circle. I know that lots of participants are very interested in zone results, which is why I post them to the website. But it's also good to note that some of the zones are really large and some of them are very small. And of course, some of them have different habitat. And as Geoff goes through the slides for the species, I hope to comment in at least some places about what zones are seeing the most of what species.
Great. Okay, so the next. So in our species list here, 123 species, which is a pretty remarkable number for this far north and in the winter. A total of 123 species have been seen in Edmonton since 1905. Obviously not all in 1 year. And last year we added none. sadly. The year before, we added yellow-rump warbler, remarkably, but in 2021, we added none. So we'll have to see from Anne at the end of the list if we were successful this year. So 43 species have been seen on our A list, 16 or more times in the past 20. So these are birds, species that we expect to see. Not guaranteed because it's only 16 out of 20, but pretty sure we'll get them. So Canada goose, I'm not going to read all these numbers. You can scan them. Last year we saw 2.
Yes, so this is new to the A list. And so this is our first change back. And after reporting them over several years, this year we had 0.
Wow.
So
much for putting them on the A list.
yeah. Next year.
Okay. And I was just trying to look up one of the numbers. Some of you may have heard me get an interview on CBC. And here it is. So in 2021, Lethbridge had the North American world record for the number of Canada geese at 39,366 in Lethbridge, which has just blew me away when I read that. It's like, wait a minute, there's, well, you can see the world record there in the US of 381,000, but last year, Lethbridge beat everybody at 39,000. So that's a pretty remarkable record. Oh, sorry, it's all mallards.
Mallards. So for this count, we saw 480.
So that's up from last year.
Yes, and so most of the mallards are seen in zone 11 because there's a lot of spilled grain along the train tracks.
Ah, so they're not on the river necessarily.
They're back and forth, but I think that during the day they're heading over for grain. So the higher numbers come in on zone 11.
Great. So here's a graph of what it looks like, the number of mallards over time. So there were a few wintering here even in 1955. And you can see around 1990, there's a huge spike, almost 5,000 mallards on our Christmas bird count. And a graduate student at the time studied those mallards and determined that they were surviving, but by the end of the winter, they were so malnourished they couldn't fly. And a lot of them weren't able to fly until the end of the summer. In other words, they lost the breeding season. So if there was a genetic component to staying over, it died out pretty rapidly. As you can see, the number overwintering dropped pretty dramatically in the early 1990s. Oops. Common goldeneye. Last year we had 220.
And this year, 159. And
So
so most of those 159 were in zone 8. That's where the biggest number came in from.
And presumably that's part of the river, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Rough grouse, last year we had none.
And this year we had none, and that's 4 years in a row.
Wow. So that seems weird because a lot of river valley species like pileated woodpeckers are increasing. So that's pretty tough if rough grouse are decreasing, and I'd have to look at the numbers, but that's going to put them in jeopardy of staying on the A list. Gray partridge.
This year, 35. And most of those were in 13 North.
Yeah, which I think is sort of an industrial area with lots of waste space.
And you can see that 13 North holds the zone record for gray partridge. That
Right.
was from quite a while ago, but.
Right. Rock pigeons.
Yes. So, and I wanted to say, I'm sure a lot of people wonder why we're so specific when we name the birds. But if we remember that these counts take place in many different countries, and there are actually many different kinds of pigeons, for example, that's why we're calling them rock pigeons. That is how we have to identify them when we send the data to Audubon. So rock pigeon this year, 703.
Wow, so that's only half of last year.
Yeah, and again, zone 11 excels in that because of the spilled grain around the grain terminals there.
So a question then is, were there only half as many, or were they just not flying around because of the cold weather?
So oddly enough, I did notice that one zone reported no pigeons. And I kind of asked the zone captain if that was going to be a target bird for next year. And the response was they felt that the pigeons were there, but the weather, given the weather, they were not flying around, so they didn't go.
Right, so that could affect a whole total. Sharp-shinned hawks, we had 3 last year. 7 is our all-time record.
So Sharpies, 1.
Well, 1's better than 0, but
yeah. So zone 1 counted the only Sharpie.
Good. Jim and Barb Beck would be proud. Cooper's hawk, we missed these last year.
Yes, so this year, zone 3 found 1.
Oh, good. Excellent. Northern goshawk, we had 4 last year.
This year, 3.
Oh, that's close. Bald eagles, there was a comment. Where was that comment? I think it was on TV. Somebody surprised they had seen a bald eagle around Edmonton in the winter. They thought they all left, and I was wishing I could grab the microphone and update them on wintering eagles. Anyway, we had 10 last year.
Yes, so this year I reduced the number down to 6 from the reports I received. 1 was easy because it was a juvenile, and the rest were all adults. And there was 1 adult that had such a great perch, 3 different zones reported it. So I only counted it once, so sorry to the zones who had their bald eagle removed.
Great. Yeah, and that's obviously to try and reduce duplication, which we can do for big birds, can't do it for small ones. Oops, now what did I do? There. Great horned owl, we had 10 last year.
So this year it's 9.
Oh, so they're holding their own?
Yeah, and they were scattered throughout the count circle.
Maybe they're eating a few too many rough grouse, and that's, but they're certainly holding their own in our forested valleys. Boreal owl, we had 1 last year.
Yeah, so I actually expected that to be on the B list tonight.
Oh, sorry, I guess I didn't catch that move.
So I'll say Boreal owl is actually on the B list now.
Sorry,
shall I give you the number now?
Sure, because it won't occur in the B list. Sorry, that's a change I missed.
Yeah, so Boreal owl slipped down to the B list. I have to change pieces of paper here. So we did have 1 reported this year.
Great. And I gathered there were some owl prowlers out.
Yes.
You recorded 3.5 hours of owl prowling. So congratulations to the owl prowlers that presumably got this over a daytime prowler.
Yes, there was some owling done. I believe 2 different zones did a bit of owling, and the conditions were a little better during the night than they were during the day. So they had the nice still conditions, I think.
Good. Well, I hope I don't get any out of order again, Anne. Sorry about that one.
That's what makes it interesting.
Yep. Saw-whet owl.
Saw-whets, we
had 2 last year.
3 this year.
Oh, good. 50% increase. The population's booming. But still way down from 1993 when we had 26, which is obviously a bumper year in zone 1, thanks to zone 1. So here's what the number of saw-whet owls looked like over the years. We had a lot of people going out owling in the late 80s and into the early 2000s, and then it kind of dropped off as an activity. And as some of you know, I've been encouraging others to go out. So I'm glad a couple of groups went out this year and found the boreal owl and the saw-whets. So I think this graph really reflects the effort put into searching for owls rather than real population changes. Three-toed woodpecker?
0 this year.
No, last year we only had one in count week. CW means count week, which is 3 days before or 3 days after the bird count. So we almost missed it last year, and I guess we did miss it this year. Downy woodpecker, we hold the Canadian record. If Barb Beck was here, she'd be banging the cowbell. 569 in 2015. And this year?
So this year we had 355, and I had to check the zone record because 64 of those were counted in zone 10, but it's obviously not a zone record.
Not quite. Getting close, but not quite. And hairy woodpecker, the big cousin.
So we had 52 this year, and only one zone missed that species.
So almost as many as last year, but so that's a good news story. And pileated woodpecker, we hold the Canadian record. In 2021, we set the Canadian record at 86.
So we again had 57, same as last year.
Okay.
So a couple of zones missed this one, and I'm thinking that they probably don't have the appropriate habitat. Perhaps they're missing the larger trees that the pileated requires.
Right, or it was just too cold to get out of the car and go search for the trees that are there.
Yes.
Which I can empathize with. So that's still a good number. And again, a primarily river valley species that's holding its own compared to the rough grouse that seems to be disappearing. And flickers, there seem to be more flickers wintering. Last year we had 68.
Yes, so this year we had 65, and zone 13 north reported the most, but I did see that everybody but one zone reported them. So lots of flickers out there, and they're across the whole circle.
Great, that's good to see. And merlins, I have to insert, Calgary beat our world record of 41 in 1986. And, you know, an honest editor would take that line out. But since it was Calgary that beat us, and they only beat us by 2, I have to rest on our laurels of 1986 and say, in this case, we have the second record. Last year, we only had 5.
Yes, and we had 5 again this year.
Ah, okay, good. Yeah, and I just don't know. I don't see as many wintering merlins as I did in the 1980s. So I think there actually has been at least an overwintering drop in numbers. I don't know about breeding populations, but northern shrike, a visitor from the north.
Sorry, we had 2 again this year.
Oh, good. That's good. It's another species that's in jeopardy in the Edmonton circle because we're starting to consume the last of the open fields and woodlots that this species uses in the winter. Blue jays, we hold a Canadian record.
And this year we counted 320.
Oh, so they're holding their own despite the cold weather. So one might infer there's actually a population increase, but the cold weather prevented us from recording that. Black-billed magpies, one of my favorite birds. I know there's some booze in the background, but everybody's on mute. So, but we hold the world record, which obviously includes the Canadian record of 3,447, and that was only a couple of years ago. So hopefully they're still doing well.
Yes, so in spite of the weather, and certainly magpies do go and shelter in the evergreen trees sometimes when it gets really snowy. We counted 1,994.
So given the weather, that's comparable to last year's number, down a few hundred, but not a lot. Good. So there's a raw number of magpies, and you can see they've oscillated since 1985, when we increased the number of people participation, they've oscillated between 2,000 and 3,500. But if we divide by the number of seen per party hour, their numbers are actually lower now in terms of density than they were prior to 1985. So you can see the complete flip of the graph. There's the raw numbers going up in 1985 when we had that huge increase in people participation. And then when you divide by the number of hours spent, it does a complete flip. And so they were actually more abundant per party hour from 1955 to 1985 than they have been since. But since 1985, you can see the graph slowly increasing. I'm sure the line there, if somebody did statistics on it, would show a significant increase. But in the last 2 years, the number per hour of effort has actually dropped, but hopefully they'll recover from that in subsequent years when we have a warmer bird count. Crows.
So this year we counted 60.
Oh, not quite a world's record. We're not going to beat the 300,000 from Pennsylvania. But 60 is more than last year, so that's good.
Yes, well, perhaps. I'm getting some notes together, and I think we might be working on some crow versus raven ID. Yeah,
it's definitely challenging people to make sure they know which is which when they're, if you get a nice profile and they're flying over, it's easy. But if you just get a quick glimpse, it's like, was that a crow or was that a raven? So, but speaking of ravens, last year we had 38. How many crows did we have? Sorry?
60.
60.
Yeah.
And ravens were getting roughly 10 times that. So 502 last year.
And this year, 394.
So still a lot. And again, with the cold weather, they probably weren't flying around a lot either. But certainly worth.
I heard they were playing in the snow.
Ah, okay. As ravens will do. Black-capped chickadees, we hold a Canadian record, 6,239 in 2003.
And this year we counted 2,132.
Wow, so that's down a lot. So hopefully we can blame that on the cold weather and the chickadees not wanting to fly around a lot. Boreal chickadees, always harder to find. So we had 11 last year.
Yeah, and this year we had 10.
Oh, so they're holding their own even if the black caps were down. And kinglets, an overwintering bird that I think a lot of us wonder how they manage. But there were 2 last year.
And we counted 2 again. And so there was 1 in zone 5 and 1 in zone 12. And I thought, wow, they must have had some really dedicated bush feeders to be out there in those snowy conditions to be able to find those tiny little birds. So well done.
Great, I agree. Well done. Red-breasted nuthatch. 358 last year. Sorry.
432 this year.
Oh, so despite the weather, here we're making excuses for low numbers, and the nuthatches actually are more than last year.
But I think feeders, maybe?
Yeah, I thought of that, but then why weren't the chickadees higher at feeders? So I don't know. It's always hard to puzzle these things out. It's one of the problems with monitoring in general, like we do at the Beaver Hill Bird Observatory. We get these monitoring numbers that change, but it's explaining the numbers that we often are guessing at. But at least when we record serious declines, then someone else can step in and do the research to determine why there's been a decline. White-breasted nuthatch, we had 226 last year.
173 this year.
No, so down a little bit, but not too bad. Brown creeper, another tiny bird that manages to overwinter in small numbers.
So this year we had 8.
Oh, so they've doubled population increase.
And I was surprised at that number with the conditions the way they were.
Yeah. and with everyone's reluctance to go bush beating. So congrats to the bush beaters that found those. Starlings, most of our starlings head south or west for the winter, but we had 63 last year.
And 50 this year.
So they're holding their own.
And most of those were wintering in zone 13 south.
Okay. Townsend Solitaire, a visitor from the mountains that seems to be pretty regular. We had 18 last year.
And 5 this year.
Yeah, so fewer of them, but again, that could be the bush beating being down to find them. Robins, I think they're almost increasing in numbers. I haven't graphed them recently, but 84 last year.
25 this year, and most of them were in zone 2.
Oh, okay. Bohemian waxwings. We are the waxwing capital of the world. We set a world record in 2005 of 35,298. And nobody's beaten us, not even Calgary yet. We had, 2,000 and change last year.
And this year, only 403, and most of those were in zone 10.
So a dramatic decrease, but that's not unusual. They fluctuate wildly in numbers depending upon, probably depending upon partly how their population is doing, but also, maybe more importantly, what alternate food there is elsewhere, and whether they have to come into the city to get winter food or not. So that's another big factor. Cedar waxwings, the smaller cousin that we only get small numbers of. We had 17 last year.
And this year we had 38, and zone 4 had an overwintering flock of 32.
Wow, well, congrats on the observers. It's not always easy to tell them apart if they're circling around or sitting up in a backlit by the sun. So well done. House sparrows, 5,400 last year. 2.5 million is a record from Chicago.
So this year we counted 4,768.
No, so again, given the weather, that's probably not a bad number. Excuse me. So there's just another graph showing the raw numbers. And again, you can see the peak in 1985, 86, 87, reflecting the increase in observers. So this graph almost mirrors the participants graph of showing an increase and then a decline. But that's what it actually looks like when we look at the number of sparrows seen per 10 party hours. I don't know why there's such a dramatic increase about 1970, 71, a dramatic increase, but the numbers otherwise have been fairly stable at between 50 and 100 per 10 party hours almost since the count began. So their numbers are probably a reflection of things being pretty good in the city, at least to the level that a house sparrow needs for habitat. Pine grosbeak's a winter visitor that's sometimes here, sometimes not. We had 145 last year.
43 this year.
It's great. So that's still not too bad for the year. House finch, a relatively new arrival. Our record is 1,709 set last year.
And this year we had 1,081.
So we didn't beat our record. So here's the graph of the raw numbers, which I didn't convert to party hours, just because they arrived mostly since the 2000s. So there were, I think it was one record in 1985 and 4 of them in 95, and then a dramatic increase in the early 2000s with a drop this year. And purple finch, the similar cousin. We had none last year.
Yes, so this was your challenge bird for us for this year. And we did count 2. And so we had 2 feeder watchers, one in zone 3 and one in zone 4, that were reported a single bird each. And I corresponded with them, and they had reasons why their birds were not their usual house finches. So we were able to record those as purple finches. So great.
Great, good, well done. So this is a graph of purple finches, and I must admit it's somewhat problematic if you overlay it with the house finches, because the purple finches took a big increase in '87, and then were seen pretty much every year until 2010. And then I think we started to discount purple finches as house finches, which is why I then a couple of years ago issued the challenge that we need to pay more attention to the purple finches and not dismiss any reddish finch as a house finch. So I'm not sure I totally believe that some of these weren't house finches before we realized in the early 2000s they've arrived, but I have no proof of that. So I think we have to accept it at face value that there was a time period there where purple finches were relatively common, and now they're relatively rare like they were prior to 1987. Redpolls. Last year we had 1,314.
So this year we only had 49.
Right. So I read an article by Project Feeder Watch, and it showed that in recent decades, the last 20 years, redpolls have peaked every 4 years and then crashed the following year. And last year was a peak. So the anticipation is this year will be a crash. The number should increase over the next 2 years, and then 3 years from now we should get another peak. What's curious in their graph is prior to 2000, redpolls peaked every second year. So they had a low year, high year, low year, high year. And then in 2000, it switched to a peak every 4 years. And I have not read an explanation as to why that frequency changed from every 2 years to every 4 years. So hopefully the numbers will increase over the next couple of years. White-winged crossbills. Last year we had 80.
So this year we counted 7 of them, and they were counted in zone 9. So well done to the people who found that little flock.
I agree. Well done. Pine siskins, more common in the summer than in the winter, but they do occur here. We've had up to 1,700. Last year we had 87.
So this year we counted 8. So there were 1 or 2 birds in just a few zones, very small numbers.
All right, good. Dark-eyed junco, another bird that I think is a bit more common now than it was historically in the Edmonton area in winter. 119 last year.
I'm checking the zone record. No, we're okay. So this year we had 444.
Oh, good. That's quite an increase from last year. Great. Well done, feeder watchers. White-throated sparrow, another feeder bird that overwinters. We had 9 last year.
And this year we had 3, 2 in zone 3 and 1 in zone 13 north.
Good. So our 8.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Geoff.
Okay, so we have 43 species on our A list. So how many this year? I don't know if anyone else is keeping tally, but I have Anne's tally right in front of me. So we had 40 species out of our 43, which is actually quite a high proportion, given that the A list is made of species that can only occur 16 out of 20 times. So that's a really good start to our count list. So the B list has, I think we changed that to 20, didn't we?
Yeah, that was that was a typo on my part. The B list now has only 20 species.
Yeah, and you told me that, and then I forgot to go to this file and change it. So that should read 20 species have been seen. So I don't know if we want to click through. Yeah, we should click through all these. So pintail, there were none last year.
And none this year.
Okay, and scaup, none last year.
And none this year.
Common merganser, none last year.
And we had 2 recorded thanks to a bush beater in zone 7 who slogged along the edge of the river.
Oh, great. Well done, whoever did that. Good catch. So, of course, the B list are species seen 5 to 15 times. So, you know, a quarter to 3/4 of the time. So we don't expect to get a high proportion of these. Rough-legged hawk, I always like to remind us that Sidney Stansel, who organized the first Christmas bird count in 1906, still holds the Edmonton record of 6. But last year we had 0.
And this year we had 0.
Snowy owls, a species that's harder to find within the Edmonton circle because we pretty much eliminated all the open fields for them. Last year there was 0.
And this year there was 0.
That's going to be a tough one to find in the future as we pave the rest of our circle. Barred owl. Now here's a chance for a bird to be in the River Valley if someone's up early or out late to find them. Last year we didn't get any.
So this year we did have one reported within the circle.
Great. Well, congratulations to whoever found that one or heard it. That's awesome. I guess one danger of the owlers going out is they might hear each other's calls and record them. But if there's only 2 parties, that presumably didn't happen this year. Great.
Yeah, yes, we did have a little bit of discussion. I was kind of checking in with the zone captains, and when I found out who was doing it, they were well separated.
Great. Good to know. Great gray owls, none last year.
Yeah, so I'll just say, so this is where I kind of expected boreal owl, and I'll just
Right,
mention
sorry.
it because we're going to want to add that one bird or that one species into our tally here for B list. And so, sorry, great gray is 0.
Yeah, no, and my apologies again for not moving it over to the B list. Long-eared owl. So
Is
last
0.
year,
Oops, sorry.
0 as well.
Yes, sorry.
No, no worries. Black-backed woodpecker, we had 4 last year.
We had 1 in zone 3.
Good. Well done in zone 3. Prairie falcon,
0.
gyrfalcon.
0.
Oh, I guess they haven't come into the grain terminal to feed on the pigeons. Canada jay, not a common visitor in winter.
0.
Evening grosbeaks. I hate to say, but I've got a small flock of up to 10 coming to my feeder, but I'm well outside the count circle. So last year there were none in the circle.
And none this year.
Darn. A hoary redpoll,
So
the
this
white
is
cousin to the red redpoll.
yes, so this one's dropped off the A list down to the B list now, and we did 0.
Okay. And red crossbill. Last year there was 1.
And this year we had 10, flock in zone 2.
And I'm proud to say Jerry Barsbergen and I saw that flock. They were in Westbrook. We actually stopped because the bird flew right in front of us and turned into a boreal chickadee. And there were 2 boreals, and so we were out of the car searching the spruce tree, much to the chagrin of the neighbors. And the tree behind them was this flock of red crossbills that stood out quite well for us.
Nice.
The goldfinch, another bird that seems to be very common, at least reported on Alberta Birds on Facebook this year. We had none last year.
So we counted 1 in zone 12.
Okay, well, we'll take 1. Snow bunting, another bird that's getting hard to find within our Edmonton circle as we continue to pave our circle. Last year we had 70.
Yes, so this is new to the B list, and we had 0.
No, may not stay on the list long if it keeps that up. Tree sparrow, last year we had none.
And this year we had none.
And white-crowned sparrow, we had none last year.
And we had 1 in zone 2 this year.
Oh, excellent. Good. So there were, again, this should be 20 species on our B list. How many in 2022? And if I've counted them up right, there were 7. Is that right?
Yes, that does include the boreal owl.
Yeah. So 67 species are on our A and B list. And how many Oh, how many we get this year? Oh, I forgot to write the number in. Oh dear.
So,
Anyway, that
yeah,
should have been,
okay.
sorry, go ahead. 47, right?
Yes, we had a total of 47 on the A and B.
Right. So then there are 58 other species that have been seen less than 5 times, our so-called C list, which we don't go through. Were there any C list species this year, Anne?
Sadly, no.
And none were seen. And were there any new species? Oops. So any new species seen this year?
No.
Okay, so we had 49 species last year, and we only had A and B list species this year, so our total is 47. So one less than last year, but still quite respectable. We won't compare ourselves to Calgary. We'll just be happy with our 47. So this is a graph of the total number of species, and as you can see, over the years, the number of species recorded on the Edmonton count grew up to about the year 2000, and then has been in a shallow decline since then. 2000, we actually, for a couple of years there, broke 60 species. Quite a few years we broke 50, but we haven't broken 50 now for, 4 or 5 years. So maybe we can do that in the future. Part of that is the lack of waterfowl on the river. We've got quite a few bee species waterfowl that aren't turning up in current years. So I think that's the end. I don't know if you have any closing comments, Anne?
No, I will just again say that these results, along with some additional notes and the full zone results, will be available on the count website, as well as some great photographs that participants sent in to me. There's one comes to mind that's an awesome shot of one of those cedar waxwings in the snow. So take a look at that in a couple of days. Give me a couple of days to finish that.
Great. Well, I have no other comments, so thank you all for listening in. I haven't followed the chat, so I don't know, Karen, if there's any chat questions that we should try and answer. No, have we lost Karen?